Good afternoon and welcome to the July edition of the Small Business Association of Michigan's webinar series. My name is Ken Root. I'm the Director of Membership and Strategic Relations. And shortly here I'm going to introduce our presenter, Tom Borg. But before I do so, I just wanted to go over a couple quick things. Today's webinar is on making service counts, so servicing customers and so on. But if you have any questions of any sort throughout the webinar, I ask that you utilize the Q&A feature or the chat feature, either or. I can monitor both, and we have set aside time at the end of today's presentation to go through all of the questions that you may have. The Q&A and chat feature can be found, I believe, in the upper right-hand corner. Just click on the icon there, type in your question, and I will get to the question at the end of the webinar. Additionally, if you have any audio issues of any sort, obviously if you're having them now, you can't hear me, but I suggest you dial in, hang up and dial back in, or dial in through your computer. Lastly, as always, we record all of these webinars and put them on our website at sbam.org. So if there's anything that you did miss, I suggest you look for this sometime early next week on our website. You'll be able to access it, go through it multiple different times, and really hammer into the information. So with that said, I am very excited about today's webinar in reference to servicing customers, and very excited to bring Tom Borg from Tom Borg Consulting to us today. Tom is the founder and president of Tom Borg Consulting, LLC. And through his consulting, mentoring, and strategic work sessions, he really assists small business owners like yourselves with profitability, gaining, and retaining customers. His background includes being a recreation director, senior citizens coordinator, and building administrator for local government. And his responsibilities included really all staff-related issues: the hiring, firing, training, presenting, facilitating, all of the things that you as a business owner deal with. Later, he was hired by Dale Carnegie and Associates as an independent contractor, where he served in multiple positions, including area manager, sales, instructor. And since 1990, he's been a business consultant, mentor, trainer, and author within his own company, Tom Borg Consulting. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Tom Borg, who is going to walk us through today's webinar. Tom?
Thank you, Ken. Thanks for having me here today, and it's an honor and a privilege to be on our webinar. And I'd like to say hello to everyone out there. We'll definitely want to answer all your questions towards the end of the program. So you should have that workbook in front of you. I'm going to be referring to that as we go through the program. I believe in the fill-in-the-blank method because it's been said that the faintest ink is stronger than the best memory. So that's the way we want to approach it. It's been said that there was a young man that walked into a lumber camp one day. He wanted to get a job as a lumberjack. Now, he figured he could make some pretty good money at this job, and he was a college student, so he figured he'd make some money to go towards books and tuition and all those expenses that go towards college. So he's a little bit nervous, but he walked into the foreman's office, and the foreman said, "Now, son, just a second. Before we start our interview, I want you to know that there's going to be a little test that you're going to have to take, and that is you're going to go out and cut down trees for 3 days. At the end of that third day, we'll decide whether or not we can keep you on as a full-time lumberjack." Now, the young man was in pretty good shape, says, "I can handle this." So the first day he shows up for work, he walks out there, he goes to work cutting down those trees. At the end of the first day, he's got 48 trees knocked down. He feels pretty good about that. Second day he shows up for work, works just as long, just as hard, and at the end of the day, he tallies up the number of trees he's knocked down, and lo and behold, there's only 36 trees. Something's wrong. He really wants the job, so the next day he comes in a little bit early, works 2 coffee breaks, part of his lunch break, and a little bit later that evening. And then, with great anticipation, he tallies up the number of trees he's knocked down. Much to his chagrin, there are only 24 trees. He's upset. He's beside himself. Here comes the foreman. Foreman says, "Well, son, how'd you do?" The young man, being a little upset, says, "Man, I don't know." I said, I can't figure it out. I said, "I worked longer and harder today than I did the first day. I only cut down half as many trees. I can't figure it out." So the foreman, being somewhat of a compassionate man. He said, "Well, son," he says, "where are your cutting tools?" That young man ran off, gathered up all of his cutting tools, brought them back, showed them to the foreman, who looked them over very carefully, and then made the remark, said, "Son, these tools are dull." Dull. When was the last time you sharpened them? And the young man looked back at the foreman and says, "Sir," he said, "I don't think you get it. And that is, I have been so busy cutting down trees, I haven't had time to sharpen my cutting tools." Foreman looked back at him with a little less compassion and said, "Son, I don't think you get it. And that is, if you want to be a professional lumberjack, you've got to make the time to sharpen your cutting tools." Now, I'd be surprised if most of us have not heard that story at least once before, but it bears repeating, because here today I want to thank you for taking the time and the energy and recognizing that you've got to make the time to sharpen your cutting tools, and that's why you're with us on this program. I love what Ben Franklin once said, one of the founding fathers of our country. He said, "You know, if you take the coins of your change purse and empty them into your head, your change purse will never be empty." And what he was referring to, of course, is education, training as we know it today as well. So thanks for taking the time to be here with us. We're going to certainly make it worth your while. All right, so here's a couple notes to myself here. One is that I take the smorgasbord approach. Now, if you catch that last four letters there, what I mean by that is, last time you went to a smorgasbord dinner or lunch, you went there with your significant other or your spouse, and you even though you spend a lot of time with this person, know them very well, you walked up to this table full of food with empty plates, and invariably you came back from that table with different things on your plate. That's the same thing that's going to happen today. There may be one person on the call that will say, "Well, this is a great idea, I can use this." But the next person might think, "Well, that's not something I can use in my business, it's a little bit different." That's okay. What I'm going to suggest to you is just take whatever works for you, leave the rest on the table. There'll be a lot to offer, so keep that in mind. All right, so with that said, let's take a look at that workbook that you have there in front of you. And looking on the first page there where it starts out with what is your definition for excellent customer service? Now, when I do this program in my live audiences, I typically get answers that infer some of the following. Things like, it's exceeding customers' expectations, it's going the extra mile, it's doing more than people would ever expect. So whatever might fall under that umbrella for you, those are the words I want to get across to you. Essentially, consistently doing more than your customer expects. That would be a great definition for excellent customer service. So doing more than expected. Number two. And let's work our video here, or PowerPoint. So next, number two there's no slide for this one, but the word is ka-ching. Ka-ching. That's where you amaze and delight the people you serve. So when you hear that sound, you know you're doing something right for your clients and customers. And then if you hear number three, the word I want to give you there, it's a very scientific word, it's kerplunk. That's where you or your team disappoint the people that you serve. That's where people just kind of look at you with a blank stare on their face, or they might make a comment or grunt about something that they weren't very excited about, but that's the sound of not doing what you're supposed to do, and that is the kerplunk. All right, so let's move on to the next slide here. So here's a great question for everyone to think about, and that is, what type of business are you really in? What type of business are you really in? Now, before I have you answer that question on your own there, I got to tell you a story about the railroad industry. The railroad industry. Yeah, way back in the day, they were the only thing around. I mean, if you wanted to go from one side of the country to another, it was the railroad. If you wanted to transport goods, it was the railroad. It was just the way we moved people and things back in the day. Well, along came the airline industry, and believe it or not, the airline industry wanted to partner with the railroad industry. However, the heads of the railroad industry were so taken by themselves that they felt they didn't need anybody else. And they felt that the airline industry was something that was going to come and go, and that since they were in the railroad business, that's all they needed to know, and that's all they needed to do. Well, we know what happened since then. Trucking, airlines, automobiles have just about replaced the railroad industry, and they're not as profitable or very close to being break even, if anything, today. So one of the things they forgot was that they were not in the railroad business, but they really were in the people business. They were in the business of helping people move their goods, or maybe they themselves. So when you think about yourself, your own business, whatever that might be, retail, or maybe it's a product or manufacturing, whatever it might be, the type of business you're really in is the people business. So there's the word I want you to put there on your workbook. It's the people business. However you serve those people, ultimately, it's that person you're serving that makes the most difference. Now, moving on to number 5. Here's a question I ask all of my audiences when I do the live programs, and that is, do you have customers or clients? Oftentimes people will give me the answer, well, when I think of the word customer, they say, I think of a faceless entity, one done, a number. At the same time, when you think of the word client, it infers a business relationship that's ongoing. So what I like to think of when we're thinking about the people we serve, think about them as clients. If you can do that, now however you call them. Some people, if you're in a credit union, they might call them members. Or if you were at say you were running a church, they would call one of the parishioners. Or let's say you were at Disney, they'd call you a guest. You see, so whatever it would be that would infer that that person is more than just a one-done situation is what I would encourage you to start preaching to your team, to your employees, so that they get the fact that, hey, we're looking to serve people over a long period of time. Now, let's take that a step further. And this isn't on our overheads here, but when you think about serving people over a long period of time, in the surveys that have been done, some industries that I've worked with, they'll say their average length of their customer's life would be 5 years or 7 years or 10 years. Let's just make it simple. Let's say the average lifespan of your customer would, or let's call them a client, that's what we want to call them, of your client would be 10 years. So all right, if that's the case, figure out how much do they spend with your business each year. Let's say a customer might, to make it simple, they would spend $1,000 a year with your business. Okay, if you keep them for 10 years, then literally they are a $10,000 client. So if there's something that comes up in the course of a transaction, there's a problem, there's an issue, maybe somebody loses their temper, we have to realize that that person we're dealing with, they really represent $10,000 of gross income over 10 years. So you want to treat them just that way, that they are more than just that one transaction. So that's just something to keep in mind. A good point to share with your team members, because sometimes they look at it as just as that client as being a person that's a bit of an inconvenience for them that afternoon or that morning. So a little thought, just keeping that in mind. All right, let's move ahead. Obstacles to you and your team keeping a positive service attitude. So let's give you a couple of these right here. First on the list, demanding clients. Many times a positive service attitude is railroaded by a demanding client, someone that's just, out of the loop. They're just being a little too persnickety, and they're just being too demanding. So what happens is the team member might cop an attitude towards that individual. That's a challenge. That's a problem. So we got to be careful with that. Another obstacle to keeping a positive service attitude, and we're on number 6, so if you want to fill these in, I would encourage you to do that, because remember, the ink is going to maintain that memory a lot longer than your own mind. Second is employees are not treated properly by management. This is a powerful message here. Fact is that if you treat your employees poorly, they're probably going to treat your clients poorly as well. If you treat them well, if you treat your team members with respect, they're more likely to treat your clients with respect. So it does start at the top. Employees are not treated properly by management. That would be an obstacle to keeping a positive service attitude. Okay, let's look at the next one. Employees don't have the right tools. They're just not given the right tools. I was working with one company some years ago, and they desperately needed new computers. They were using computers that were really outdated, very slow. It was really hard for the employees to service their clients properly with that type of hardware. So eventually what happened is the owner saw the light and made the investment in purchasing new computers. So whatever it might be, maybe it's software for the programs that you need for your people. Maybe it's just having the right trucks or enough of them. Maybe it's having the right type of telephone system. Having the right tools, critical. If you don't have them, you will be creating an obstacle to creating positive service in your organization. Let's look at another one. Underpaid staff. We hear that more and more every day, especially in this economy in Michigan. It's very healthy. Unemployment is it's one of the lowest points it's been in a long, long time. So we've got to be able to pay adequate wages. I think it was Ken Blanchard that once said, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. So I'm going to encourage you to invest in the team that you have there and pay them fairly, pay them even a little bit better. One of my colleagues, Mel Kleiman, an expert on hiring, suggests very strongly that if you really want the best, you're going to have to pay for them, and they will appreciate it. And that's not the only reason they work there, and it isn't the top reason, but it is an important reason for most people today. Okay, so let's see what else we've got here. Obstacles to keeping a positive service attitude. Inertia. That's just not being able to move forward on any initiatives, on any ideas, or any suggestions you might receive from your team members or from your clients. I'll tell you a little story. Gates Brown, I'm not sure if anyone here has heard of Gates Brown, but he was a former Detroit Tigers outfielder. He was also a designated hitter. Gates Brown was one of the former players that was hired by the Tigers Fantasy Camp, the one I attended some years ago. And Gates was kind of the commissioner of the camp. He would be the guy that would give all the campers, that's what they call this, paid $3,500 to play, and they called you a camper. He would be the guy that would kind of set us down in the bleachers there at Henley Field, which is right next to the Joker Marchant Stadium in Lakeland, Florida, and get all these campers. We're all sitting there one Monday morning there. The camp just began, and he started out with his little address, which was something that was designed really to protect the campers, and it went something like this. And I got to remember, Gates had a really deep voice, and it sounded like this. He said, "Okay, everyone, I know you're excited about playing ball this week, and just looking around, I know most of you are in your 40s and 50s and 60s, and you probably haven't played ball for many, many years, and if any of you are playing softball, you haven't played since last summer. So what I want you to understand is, here's my advice to you to prevent any unnecessary injuries over the next week." And he went on to say, "I want you to start out slow and taper off." Now, we all laughed, but the idea was to make us think about not overdoing it. But back to our analogy in terms of being in business, and that obstacle to preventing a positive service attitude, oftentimes that inertia. People have great ideas. They start out slow with them, and then they taper off. It's exactly what small business owners do, and I don't want you to be one of them. So the key here is to take a look at the obstacles to keeping a positive service attitude, inertia being one of them, and don't let it happen in your organization. Once you get an idea, you got to run with it and go with it all the way through. Okay, so let's move ahead on to number 7. And I don't have these listed. Maybe I do. Let's see here. What we got? That was Gates Brown's message there. Okay. All right. So number 7. Some excuses for providing poor client customer service are. Here's the excuses I typically hear. 1, we just don't have enough time to provide great service. Just don't have enough time for it. Okay. Well, that's a red flag. If you don't have enough time, I tell my clients, really, you don't have enough time not to provide the best service, because these clients aren't going to come back if you don't do it right. Second excuse I get from some of these people I've worked with is they're understaffed. They just don't have enough people. It's hard to hire these people today. These kids don't want to work. Well, guess what? If that's an excuse, you got to eliminate that excuse. You've got to hire the right people. I always suggest that you have people waiting to just come on board with you there. It's okay to hire a few extra people, put them on part-time, knowing that eventually you're going to have some turnover. So that's something to keep in mind there. Another excuse I hear is that We just don't know how to give good service. No one's taught us. And this is true. This happens so often. And it starts at the top again. Sometimes the business owner will just assume that people know how to treat other people with respect and courtesy. And not necessarily is that true. You know, I was doing some work with Eastern Michigan a few years back. One of the challenges they were running into is that they had lots of students that would work. They went to school and they could do the work study programs, they could work on campus, but what they were finding is that they couldn't interface with other students very well. Part of the newer generation is we're so dependent upon technology that we have limited the amount of face-to-face time. So when you're hiring, you've got to assume that the people that are coming on may not know everything they know about interfacing with live customers. So you may have to teach them. And that's important. Another excuse I sometimes hear, it's just too much of a hassle. You know, we just don't have time to train these employees and to give great service. It's just too much of a hassle. We just are keeping our head above water. We're trying to deliver the product and the service. We can't go overboard with this customer service stuff. Well, again, that's a red flag if you hear anyone saying that that's too much of a hassle. And finally, the last one I love to hear, and it just makes me chuckle, is it costs too much. Well, if we provide that extra service, it's going to cost us more wages. It may cost us rework of materials. We may have to give refunds, and it's going to cost too much. Well, no, not if we think about the fact that our clients, if they're going to stick around for 10 years, they're worth an awful lot when you measure it that way. And quite frankly, if you provide the best service to them, they're going to want to stay, and it's going to pay to keep them. It's going to pay to provide that great service to them. So, more ideas to consider. All right, so let's go on to the next slide here, number 8 in our workbook, and that is, the question is, or the statement is, there is no magic bullet. You must look to solve the problem with help of your internal team or external source. So what we're saying there is, when you've got challenges with providing outstanding service, there's no one book that's going to do it. There's no one great consultant that's going to come in. There's no one video you're going to get that's going to do it all for you. It's got to be part of a system, a systematic approach to dealing with the challenges you might be facing in being able to provide that kind of service that your clients really need and really want. So with that thought in mind, let's go to the next one, number 9. And here's some interesting thoughts for us to consider. 5 reasons why your customers or clients will not buy from you. Okay, these are standard reasons why people will cross the street and go to your competitor. I always tell my clients they vote with their feet and cross the street. Now today, maybe they just go to a new website and look up somebody else that's providing the same service and learn more about them before they give them their business. So, first and foremost, 5 reasons why your customers will not buy from you. They don't believe in your product or service. They just don't believe you got the best product or service. Maybe it's has some big fat claims you're making that just are kind of unbelievable. So they're just not believing that your product or service or your personnel can deliver. You know, sometimes if you have poorly trained employees or team members, they may come across as unreliable or maybe not the type of person or company they're representing that can really do what they're promising. Okay. Next on the list would be they just aren't in any hurry. The customer or client might need your service or product, but you know they don't need it right now necessarily. They'll need it eventually, but they're not in any hurry. So that's another reason they will not buy from you today. Next on the list, they just don't have the money. Okay? Well, if that's the case, they are not really a prospect. They are not really a client. They are simply a suspect. They're not qualified. They don't have the money. Don't waste your time with them. Next on the list, D, would be they just don't really need or want what you have. So they're not even a prospect or a suspect. They're not anybody. They don't have a need. They don't have a want for what you're selling. So just don't even waste your time with them. See, what happens a lot is we see people that try to market to the universe. You know, they're trying to sell their product or service to the universe, and they'll do blanket email, or they'll do these mass mailers, or they will put an ad in the newspaper, or any number of other places where they're just kind of shooting in the dark. They're just using a shotgun to just shoot, and hopefully they hit something. But that's one of the best ways to waste a lot of money. So what we're saying is they're just not really sending their messages to people that really have a need or a want. So keep that in mind when you look at your marketing budget. Finally, last one, E, is they just don't like you. They may have had a bad experience with your company. And as we all know, people will buy on emotion, and they'll back it up with logic. They'll justify with logic. So if they had a bad experience with your organization, fair enough. That's a reason for them to walk and not ever bother to come back. So those are the 5 main reasons why your customers will not buy from you, your clients will not buy from you. So if that's happening at all, again, do something to prevent that. Take some action, do some brainstorming on how you can prevent those things from happening in your organization. Okay, let's go on to number 10. Again, we'll have time for questions a little bit later. So here's some reasons why your organization should provide excellent service. First, it's great marketing. We all know that some of the best places to get more business is from referrals. So if people are happy with your services or products, they're going to tell their friends, they're going to tell their family, they're going to tell their business associates. So now, first and foremost, customer service doesn't cost a dime, but it pays huge dividends. It's great marketing. Next on the list, it's just good public relations. People like to be given the right kind of treatment. It makes them feel good, and as a result, they'll brag about you. It's just you get a reputation for that sort of thing. So it's good public relations. Next on the list, you can have happier employees. Now let's think about that. If you've got employees that don't like coming to work because they have to deal with irate clients because they're upset about the product or service they received, it wasn't up to par, so it's going to have an effect on your employees. And if they're not excited about coming to work, that's going to rub off on the next client that walks through the door or calls in on the phone. So that's part of it. Now, how about this? Next on the list, if you give great service, you're going to have lower absenteeism. It goes hand in hand with, if you have happier employees, they're going to want to come to work more often. They're not going to call in sick on Friday or Monday morning as much, just because they like coming to work. It's a great place to be. They're part of a team. It's just not a place to earn some money. Here's another reason for that. You'll have lower turnover. And I know today, more than ever, people are finding it hard to get those great employees and keep them, because it's expensive when you lose an employee. You do take all the time to train them, getting them up to speed. They may not be as sharp with the client, and they may lose a few clients or take more time dealing with the client. So it costs money to hire someone and then to get them up to speed. So if you can reduce your turnover, it's another great reason to provide excellent service, because they're going to be working in a place where they love coming to work, and customers are going to like them, clients are going to like them, and as a result, they're going to be more apt to stay with your organization. Next on the list, people appreciate it. Your clients will appreciate the good service. You may get thank you letters. You may get thank you tweets. You may get thumbs up on some of the social media sites that are out there. So people appreciate great service. And then certainly, most importantly, lastly here, people will come back. People will come back. They just like the fact that you do a great job, and at the same time, they'll tell their friends about you, and they'll bring them back with them as well. One more good one I have to add to this list here, and that is it's just plain good karma. What goes around comes around. It's true. What we send out in life does come back, and if it's a business that we're running, if it's that's the kind of service we send out, you can expect that same kind of great service to come to you when you need it from some other place where you spend your hard-earned dollars. All right, so that is all of that. Let's go on to the next one here, and that is why customers or clients will quit doing business with your company or organization. Now, they've done this study several times over the years. It always comes up very close to the very same percentages I'm going to give to you in a moment. So let's take a look. First and foremost, 1% of the clients you deal with are going to quit doing business with your company or organization because they die. Now, there's not much you and I can do about that, so that's off our list. Second, 3% are going to move away. Well, there's not much we can do about that. You know, they've got other priorities, and they move for whatever reason they're moving, so they're just not going to be able to use your services or products any longer. Next on the list is 5% will develop other friendships. So there's not a lot you can do about that, so that's just part of the game. However, when we move to the next point here, 9% are going to move from competitive reasons. Now, what that means is they think they can get a better price someplace else. However, when you start to put customer service or client service into the formula, and that means they get better service, and even though they're paying more, they appreciate that service because it makes their life easier. It might save them more time. It just means more to them. It's more value. So great client service can offset some of the competitiveness that's out there. Moving on to the next one. 14% are going to quit doing business with your organization because they're dissatisfied with the product or service. Now, back again to good customer service. If you can answer that complaint or that concern of a person, you're much more likely to retain them and keep them as a client. But the fact is, 14% of the time, people are going to leave because they're dissatisfied with the product or the service. But here's the kicker. The main reason people will leave a business or an organization is because they think you or your employees don't care. 68% of the time. That's a tragedy. They get the impression you, the business owner, or you, the manager, or you, the team member, just doesn't care about them. And we'll talk more about that in a couple of moments, how we can do that, how we can show them that we care. But these are some pretty powerful percentages, and I encourage you to use every bit of this program with your own team in your own weekly meetings or your regular meetings that you have. So this gives you some evidence, some reasons why people need to be able to understand how important providing outstanding client service really is. Okay, so let's move on. Let's go on to the next page of our worksheet there, page 2. And I want to talk about something we've all heard about, and that is called the golden rule. Everybody loves the golden rule, and we've all heard it. It's do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And that's great. It's a wonderful rule, but I've got to tell you, I believe what Dr. Tony Alexander has suggested to us, and that is the platinum rule is much better. Now, the platinum rule is simply this. Do unto others as they want to be done unto. Let me give an example. A couple of years back, we went out to Comerica Park, and as beautiful as that facility is, now it was built in 2000, where the Detroit Tigers play. You go, if you got to hit the restroom, if you're a man, no problem. You go in there, there's many, many stalls all lined up. You just go in there, do your business, and you're out of there in a much shorter period of time than the women. Because you see, who designed those restrooms for Comerica Park? Well, I can tell you, it probably wasn't women architects, because if you look at any given day at a ball game at Comerica Park, the lines to the women's restroom are much longer because they just can't handle the flow of people going into women going into that restroom. Where the men, it was designed differently, and so what we're saying is, do unto others as they want to be done unto. That's critical. Now we think about that for a moment. If you've got a millennial, that person may want to be treated a little differently than a boomer client. If you have a certain ethnic group, they may prefer certain type of service that's different than what another ethnic group might prefer, you see? So we need to find out what our customers or our clients really want and how they want to be serviced and deliver it that way. I think when we do it in that manner, we're going to be much more successful. So the answer there, number 12, is the platinum rule. Keep your customers for life. Hopefully that's at least 10 years. Do unto your clients or customers as they want to be done unto. Okay, let's go on. Number 13. Time is fleeting here. 6th client question six client customer service mistakes you and your team must avoid are, so here they are. Number 13A, not using the words please and thank you. And I've added another one in there, which has become, unfortunately, very common today. When the client would say thank you to one of your team members, typically you're going to hear this response, no problem, not you're welcome. Okay, so the words, not using the words please, thank you, or you're welcome, can get us into trouble with our clients. So again, that one point there about the response that's all too common today, and that is no problem. What's the point of saying that? I mean, was I a problem when I came into this store in the first place? No. So the key is train your people to get out of that habit. Create the right habit of saying you're welcome. It'll separate you from your competition. It really will. So it's something to think about. Okay, B. How about this one? I think Dale Carnegie had it right. Not using the person's name. Dale Carnegie once said that the sweetest, most important sound in any language to that person is the sound of his or her own name. Names are very powerful, and they're so easy to get today. You can get them from the credit card, you can get them from the check, you can get them from the CRM system that you're using. There's no reason not to use that client's name once, twice, 3 or 4 times in the conversation. Certainly don't want to overdo it, but you want to use it because people do respond to hearing their name. It's very powerful. So I encourage you to use that at all times. Next on the list, number C. And that would be not giving your client your full attention. Nothing grinds me more when I'm trying to get service in a retail store and you walk up to the register getting ready to pay for your purchase, and the person will pick up a telephone and they will try to do 2 things at once. And it makes you feel like a non-entity. It makes you feel like a customer. Like, who cares? No, I can do this phone call and bring this person up at the same time. That's not acceptable. You don't want that happening in your business. And this is something to be very, very much aware of if it's at all happening. Too often today we find people thinking that they can do 2 or 3 things at once. Not possible. They've proven that you pretty much go into a 50% or less effective mode when you try to do more than one thing at a time. Just the way it is. They've even given us those examples of people texting and driving, which I hope we never do. It makes you 4 times more prone to being in an automobile accident if you're driving and texting at the same time. So again, just don't try to do 2 things at once. Next, moving right along to number D, using the words, we can't do that. Come on. We can always do something for that client. People prefer options. Okay, they may not be able to buy a particular item because it's not made that way, but what can you say to them that would give them an option? Don't tell people what they can't do. Tell them what they can do. They'll appreciate it. So again, this is a mistake. It's a red flag if you hear anybody in your organization saying we can't do that. Please do something to prevent that from happening in the future. Next on the list, discouraging the client from giving suggestions. Now again, starts at the top. How you train your people and how you walk your talk when they give you suggestions, you see. So discouraging the client from giving suggestions. Hey, if the client took enough time to make a suggestion, that means they're trying to think of ways they could come back to your business and do more business with you. But if you kind of ignore that suggestion or say things like, oh, that'll never work, well, that's just one more reason for them to walk across the street and visit your competitor. Okay, let's go to the next one. Taking clients' criticisms personally, not professionally. It's too easy to take an upset client's remarks personally. This is something you need to train your employees on. It could have been anybody standing there that day, answering the telephone or ringing up that order or interacting with that client, but it happened to be that individual employee. And it's important for them to realize that that client doesn't know enough about that employee to make anything personal to them. So the key here is to really work with your employees, your team members, to understand the fact that, if people are having a bad day, don't take it personally. Take it professionally, and it'll go much further when it comes to treating that next client with respect and the type of service level that they deserve. Okay, so that's all of number 13. Let's go on to number 14. If you get anything out of today's program, these 4 questions that your employees have for you, if you can realize that these are critical to keeping your employees happy and keeping them working at your organization, it'll go a long, long ways in building your business. Now, I also say that these are the same questions that your clients have for you as well. So let's go into these questions. And by the way, this came from a study done through Delta Airlines some years ago. They did a study on what people really wanted from their organization. And once the study was finished, they realized, the organization that conducted the survey, they realized that these were answers that go across all industries. So it works everywhere. So let's take a look at what these questions are that your clients have for you, or your employees have for you, but they won't ask them out loud. But they will be thinking about them when you're interacting with them. Here they go. First question on the list. Do you like me? Do you like me? That sounds simple, but it's so powerful. Back to how do we show people that we like them? We simply acknowledge them with a smile, eye contact. These are things that will indicate in very short order of time, first few seconds, whether or not you like that individual, whether this be a client or an employee. You see, very important. So keep that in mind. That's the question you've got to answer for them. Next question: do you care about me? Now, how do we show care? Well, we might use their name. We might take time to know something about them, find out about their family, find out about some of their hobbies, and to actually take time to ask a few questions about that. You know, how are you doing? How's your family doing? These are things we can do. Now, if you're an employer and you've got employees, to make it a point each day to go out and about and to meet with your employees for a few moments. Just say, hey, how's it going? How'd that ball game go last night? Or how's your son doing? Taking time to really show them that you care. I think it was Cavett Robert that once said that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So take the time to show them that you care. Next on the list would be, can I trust you? Now, these are powerful questions when you think about it. But the way we show that we can be trusted as an organization or a company, and that is doing what you say you're going to do. You know, if your employee says they're going to call the client back in an hour, make sure they call them back in an hour. Otherwise, we've just, in a sense, lied to them. You know, how can they be trusted? How can you be trusted if you can't follow through on what you said you were going to do? You know? Same thing with the idea of, if you promise your employees that you're going to get some new equipment for them, or they're going to be hiring a new person to give them some support, if you don't do that in a timely manner, guess what? They're going to trust you even less. So this is critical. These are the kind of things we need to know about when we're dealing with employees, with clients. Next on the list, do you really know what you're doing? Sometimes this can be as simple as being in a meeting and the business owner is saying something about something they're going to do, and an employee raises a question that might indicate that that is not such a good idea, whatever it is you're planning on doing. And what happens is the owner will just shut them down. They'll say, yeah, you don't like it? Tough. I run this company. No, we go by the golden rule here. He who has the gold rules. Yeah, I've heard that in meetings. So the point is that, do you demonstrate that you really know what you're doing? Are you current with your association? Do you attend professional seminars? What's the last business book you've read? What magazines are you reading? What professional magazines are you reading? See, this indicates that you are keeping on track as a professional business owner or a manager, and that you're keeping on the cutting edge. See, it's walking the walk. And that's critical. We can tell our employees, our team members, our managers all we want what they should do, but they can watch us and they know exactly what they should do from your example. So this is critical. Do you really know what you're doing? How do you show that? Okay. Oftentimes tell my clients to make their libraries available to the employees, to their team members, and encourage them to read the books that you've got on your library shelf, or the CDs, or the downloads, or to take a look at the subscriptions that you're having coming across your desk. Now, why not share that with them? Okay, so I'm going to move ahead here just a moment. Right. let's go on to number 15. And that is 4 keys to your clients' customers' loyalty. Remember, we said earlier, if you can keep your clients loyal, it's a much more profitable way to run a business. So here we go. First and foremost, these are the 4 things your clients or customers really want. First and foremost, they want prompt, friendly service. No one wants to wait. They don't want to be put on hold for more than a minute. And you hopefully have a very good message on hold system that works for you and not against you. Next is they want you to solve their problem. That's what they're coming to you for. That's why they're paying you the money. They want to be able to have their problem solved. Next on the list, this is an important one. I always get a few smiles when we show this one, but they want you to jiggle the system. Yeah, we know you've got a policy here about returns. We know you've got a policy about the guarantee, whatever. But they want you to jiggle the system. They want flexibility is what they're saying. So if we can show that we are flexible as business owners or managers towards our clients or customers, we're going to just go a lot further in keeping them loyal, plain and simple. And of course, last one on the list here, if you make a mistake, and all businesses make mistakes, we're only human, certainly we're composed of humans. If you make a mistake, fix it promptly and do something extra. Don't hesitate on this one. It can cause a lot of issues, a lot of concerns. We see this happening in the national scenes where governments make mistakes and they're slow to fix it, and well, we have issues that come from all of that. So, all right, let's go on to the last thing I wanted to share with you today before we go into questions was something about a customer perception inventory. So on number 16, it's a little discussion I just want to have with you there. If you have questions on this, we'll be happy to answer them in a few moments. But what a customer perception inventory is simply looking at your business from the eyes and ears of your clients. And that might mean you call your office with an unlisted number and see how your phone is answered. It might be going and visiting your website and seeing what your customers or clients would see. It might be driving into the parking lot of your business and seeing the business from the client's perspective, and that is what's the parking lot look like? Is it clean? Is it swept? When they get out of the car, is it concrete or the pavement? Is it smooth or are there no cracks in it? As they walk up to the door, is the door clean? Does it work well? What do they smell when they walk inside your business? What's the scent in the air? You see, these are things that we can really get a real clear understanding of when we do it from their perspective, and then we can make arrangements to do some improvements in that respect. So what we're saying there is doing a customer perception inventory. Have your employees do the same thing. Have them walk in the front or have them look at it from the customer or client's perspective. And as a result, they'll give us some great ideas on how we can improve things. I was doing a program some years ago, and there's a man that owned a men's clothing store, and he typically would go into his store from the back door. And I said, go back to your business and go in the front door. Well, he did. He called me back the next day and said, it was amazing what I saw. I saw the door was needing paint. Glass, one of the panes was cracked. I had that replaced. We needed a new welcome mat. The other mat was worn out. It's just I would never have known had I not walked through the same door that my clients are walking into every day. So again, a simple solution to a perception problem that many businesses may have, and that is to do your own customer perception inventory. Okay, so with that said, I am open for some questions at this time. Ken, if you want to open it up, what are some of the questions we might have heard from our listeners?
Sure, and just so everybody remembers, if you do have a question regarding the information that Tom just shared with us, please utilize the chat or Q&A feature found in the upper right-hand corner. Tom, we do have a few questions here.
Okay.
And the first one is, and you talked about this in a lot of detail, of buy-in from the employees. How do you find those employees? Is there a way to find the employee that's going to buy into that mentality?
Well, one of the keys is to look for good people. And one of my colleagues, Ken, Mel Kleiman, he is an expert on hiring. And one of the things he shared with me, and has in some of his books, is that you really have to be looking to recruit people for your business And what he means by that is to be on the lookout for sharp employees working elsewhere. And what he suggests, I think is a great idea, have your own business card. On the back of the card says, hey, we're always looking for sharp people, and you would be a wonderful addition to our team. I'm not sure if you're even looking for a new place to work, but if that ever happens, here's our number. Call us for a confidential interview. So what he's saying is be a recruiter. Be looking for good talent all the time. And that's typically one of the best places to find it because they're already employed. They're already working someplace else.
Something else that you had talked about as well is, the customer perspective, the customer being right. Are there instances where that customer perhaps has stepped out of line or isn't right? And more importantly, how do you solve that? How do you work around that concern or issue?
That's a great question, Ken, and it's a very sensitive question, sensitive issue. The customer, quite frankly, or the client is not always right, but we can't treat them that way. So what we're saying is, yes, there are times that they may step out of line, and if that's the case, we need to very gently and very tactfully deal with them, give them options. And, like I said before, don't say, no, you can't do this, but say, here are some of the things you can do. So when it comes to that, yeah, you gotta not let them cross that line and in the long run even harm your own employees' attitudes, because if your employees are going to be taking abuse, that's not going to help in the long run, to maintain the right kind of people you want there. So the key there is to tactfully handle that client. If it means you, the owner, or the manager, getting involved, and that should happen, and then maybe in that case you might have to tell that client very gently that, you know what, we'd love to service you, but we can't work with an abusive attitude, and be happy to refer them to one of your competitors.
Right. Couple more questions here, and this one's an interesting one because I know as a small business owner, and I'm saying that indirectly just through my experience in working with them, it's incredibly simple to get caught up in the process, right? How you go about moving a customer down the line and dealing with or handling the issue or selling your product or whatever it might be. How do you get out of that? How do you I guess for lack of a better term, put yourself in the customer's shoes and see from their perspective, and more importantly, how can you train your employees down the line to do the same thing?
Well, Ken, there's a number of things we can do. One of the things we mentioned there was the customer service, the customer perception inventory. But another way to do it is to do focus groups. One of the most powerful tools out there is where you bring an outsider in, so he or she is going to be neutral. You see in the eyes of these potential focus group members, and you hold a focus group where you ask questions like, hey, how are we doing? How can we do it better? What do you like about what we're doing? What are we doing wrong? You ask all these questions, and at the same time record the session. And what you do then is then that consultant or whoever does it for you should be able to give you a report back with the live recording along with a summary of what was said. I've done that for a number of my clients. It's amazing what they learn. So that's one great way to get it. See, the idea if you get a group of people together, they're more open, they're more likely to say things because other people are already inferring some of the same comments or same thoughts. So to do a good old focus group can be very powerful.
Okay. The last question that I have here, and this also is interesting, and I deal with this very frequently. How do you compete with someone who's much, much larger? And we've dealt with this a multitude of different times with different members that just say, you know what, I think it'd be fantastic to get into that big company and work with that big company. We're just not big enough. And they work with bigger customers than me anyways. How do you compete? How do you get around that?
Well, I think one of the main advantages small businesses have today is they're flexible. They can change things much quicker, sometimes in a half a day. They can change their policies, the way they can service those clients or to customize the products that they may have for that client. So I think the key is we've got to show them that we're more nimble, we're more flexible, and at the same time be able to deliver the kind of quality that they're looking for. So yes, bigger companies sometimes have deeper pockets. They can go to greater lengths to woo those clients and to keep them. But at the same time, one of the main things small business owners have going for them is they're smaller. They don't have as much bureaucracy. They can turn things around, and usually, in some cases, they can do it for cheaper because they don't have as much of a overhead with the number of employees or management team they have.
Well, some of the other things that we've seen, and I'm saying this from experience with the Pure Michigan Business Connect Summit that we did last year, these big companies actually prefer to work with the small businesses in the state for a multitude of different reasons. Some of the reasons that you mentioned there, you know, they're more price competitive and so on. But you know, back to your entire webinar here, customer service. They know for a fact that that small business is going to treat them and put them at the top of the list because it's an important client to them. More importantly, it has a lot of positive impact in the state's economy and so on.
Exactly.
This isn't a shameless plug, but we do have another one of those coming up here in September that we're quite excited about. But that goes to show the commitment that a lot of these Tier 1 companies have now with the small business community. So, you know, from our perspective here at SBAM, if you just heard that in the background, we're getting a major storm, so I apologize.
Oh, wow.
What we're starting to see now is that these companies are committed now. They're committed to working with small businesses to both help the state economy and so on, as well as because of the things that you mentioned here in today's webinar. So,
excellent. That's a great point. That's a great point for our listeners to strive to do, to realize that they really do have advantages that they can use.
Yep, absolutely. That really wraps up the webinar and the questions that we have. Is there anything else, Tom? How do people get in touch with you if they have additional questions or want to give you a call?
Thank you for asking, Ken. Yes, and just because there's so many ideas we've generated here today that people want to know, well, how else can I build on this? I encourage everybody here to go visit my website, tomborgconsulting.com. There in my store, I've got a number of materials available. Some of my books, Making Service Count on book or CD. We've got the other book called 5 Customer Service Mistakes Small Business Owners Make, What to Do About Them. That's available. I just came out with a new book called True Small Business Brilliance. That can be ordered directly through Amazon at this point in time. But also we've got a video training program available on the store website. Also, I'm available for on-site training and consulting, or consulting and mentoring by telephone, or again on-site. But the main point is, if you have questions, feel free to give me a call. I offer anybody a free 20-minute consult. They can give me a shout if they have some questions. They have concerns about something, and give them a couple of ideas that can help them get past that. And all they need to do is call our phone number at 734-404-5909. That's 734-404-5909. Or visit our websites right there on the PowerPoint, www.tomborgconsulting.com, and we'll be happy to help you out in any way, shape, or form.
Excellent. Tom, I can't thank you enough for your time today, sharing all this valuable information for our members.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. And for those of you that were on the webinar, thank you as well for your time and for sitting in with us and listening. As always, we record these. They will be made available to you on our website here in the next, I would say, 3 to 4 business days. So stay tuned to that, and we'll also have the workbook attached to that as well if you'd like to go through the webinar multiple times. So with that, we're going to close out the webinar. Everybody have a fantastic afternoon, and thank you all for attending.
Thank you, Ken.